making up people, creating themselves from other people by finding them different, and a little too different to be associated with or to be identified with or stuff like that. This week, the topic is trauma. And since we're allowed to pretty much do what we want to do with these things, I think I went off on my own tack. Yeah, can I hear you? I don't know, is it?
There we go.
Good. Thank you. So, I think I'm finally getting to where I'm gonna start, so we'll just go there. Is the thing on for YouTube? Or
Yeah,
not YouTube,
it's
but-
recording.
'cause I hadn't heard that thing since.
Idiot.
Okay, when I was a kid, 4 years old, we were living in Syracuse, New York. And we were going home for Christmas. Well, I say home, it felt like home to me. My grandparents lived in Cincinnati and we were going back for Christmas to see them. And we came over a hill and somebody was passing and we had a head-on collision. That threw no seatbelts in those days. Now, my brother and I were in the back seat, so we were just thrown to the floor, no damage. Dad hit the ceiling, but he was wearing his Air Force cap, so the insignia hit his forehead, caused a little bruise there. Mom, on the other hand, went into the windshield. And she, of course, she broke the windshield. She was pretty hard-headed. But she immediately held her face so that we kids wouldn't see any blood, and they went to somehow they got to the nearest emergency center. So she was wearing a little bandage on all the pictures from that Christmas, little bandage on her forehead. But for years afterwards, little pieces of glass were working their way out. The shrapnel, we can call that, was working its way out. And we all carry emotional shrapnel from childhood, from teenage years, from interacting with other kids, with interacting with life. Maybe we've had a bad marriage or a bad relationship somewhere along the line, whatever it is. You know, we all carry stuff like that, and different situations can reinforce, or rather, what's the word, stimulate, re-stimulate a reaction to that doesn't seem appropriate to the current what's going on. And it really isn't. It's because some piece of emotional shrapnel was coming to the forefront from that previous experience. What made me think about all of this was listening to a radio interview where they were interviewing a couple and the woman was talking, so I didn't even know that it was a couple yet. I just heard her talking about her husband apparently had a heart attack of some sort, anyway. And she knew nothing about CPR. She knew nothing about what do you do in a situation like that. It was the wee hours of the morning. Luckily, the kids were in bed. But she said she called 911 and they told her, put your fingers together and pump on his chest. And the woman on the other end counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for 10 minutes. The reason it took 10 minutes for the emergency crew to come was this was 2020. And once they arrived, they had to put on their hazmat suits because of COVID, and then break down the door and get upstairs. He had gone from red to purple to blue to gray. And when they put him on the thing, he was flatlined. They put him on the floor. They gave him the shock treatment 5 or 6 times later. His heart started again. Blessedly, he did not suffer brain damage. He did not suffer permanent heart damage. He's fine. And he was the other part of the interview that I hadn't heard come through yet. she said, when they had him downstairs, and she came down the stairs and she said, "What should I tell the children tomorrow?" And the paramedic was kind of going, well, why don't you tell them that your husband got really sick and it was too much for you to deal with, and so he's in the hospital and people are taking care of him and he's going to recover. She said, okay. She went back upstairs, she went to bed for a couple of hours, and the next morning she got up and made breakfast for her kids. When we go through a crisis like that, we have to stuff our own feelings. We have to stuff them away. And whether it's fear, anxiety, grief, whatever, those things get pushed in the background because we have to be present to the moment. She was one of those. And of course, they didn't really get into how she released her trauma later on. Only they were talking about it to kind of tell people, this can happen to you. And if it does, don't be afraid. If you have some kind of a response later on, that is surprising. Our culture pays most of its attention to the victim, to the heart patient, to the injured in an accident, to the hostage in a hostage crisis. We don't pay much attention to the people that are serving those people, that are supporting those people. Think of the first responders, the paramedics, the firefighters, the police. They see all kinds of traumatic situations. And you can say, yeah, they have to develop a hardness. They have to develop a screen between themselves and those people, because otherwise it would just be too stressful. And most of them do, but they always run into something that gets past that touches them in their heart. And where do they go with that? Do they have counseling? Do they take it home and their wife or loved ones deal with it? What about the nurses during COVID who are trained to deal with medical injuries, and yet they were having to sit with people while those people died alone because their family couldn't be there. They couldn't come into the hospital. That, more than anything else, was getting to the nurses. It wasn't something they were trained for. Who supports those who support others? The witnesses of trauma can be traumatized. They don't have any background on how to mentally divide themselves from what's going on. They live with that, even though it didn't happen to them or somebody they know. Family members. I'm sure all of us at one time or another have had the opportunity to take care of a loved one who could no longer take care of themselves, whether age-related, whether dementia-related. And this can be for a short amount of time, a week, a few weeks. It could be a year or years. I have a friend whose wife developed dementia, Alzheimer's, and she's been in stage 4 for the last 5 years. I feel that to cope with this, he has really decided that this is his life's mission, to take care of her. And he seems to be doing a very good job, both for her and for himself. But it's really important that we don't just give lip service to, oh, everything will be all right. I'll just know it for you. I'll just know for you that everything's going to be all right. That may be true, but there's also stuff that we can do to help support people while they're supporting others. Ernest Holmes says, we don't heal in isolation, but in community. Now, this church has been really, really good about helping people who go through stuff. I've been listening to or watching Dolores's daily, what do I want to call that? Spiritual work. I consider that your spiritual work, your ministry. That's the word I was looking for. Dolores's daily ministry. And I've seen issues come up there and people supporting one another and saying, is there anything I can do to help? If there is, please let me know. Now, one of the problems we run into here, and it's one of my 5 points, is that if you find yourself either the victim of an accident, the injured person, or the sick person, or whatever, ask for help. If you are the supporter and it's getting to you, ask for help. Because so many times people they want to help, but they don't know how. And it's funny, people will say, if there's anything I can do, let me know. And they never get that phone call. Why? Because we don't want to be a burden on other people. The problem with that philosophy is then you're trying to shoulder something that a whole community needs to be handling, not you alone. We don't heal in isolation, but in community. Many hands make, light the burden, right? Never, ever think to yourself, I can't ask for help because I will be a burden on them. Just don't ask the same person over and over again, that's all. I mean, I was flat on my back for 5 weeks. I could barely get to the bathroom and I was in terrible pain when I did. The first week, some of my closest friends said, well, can I bring you supper? I said, oh, that would be wonderful. And they came over and I was lying in bed and they had supper with me. But after a week, they had their own life. They had to get back to it. And I went, oh, she's not coming over anymore. Neither is the other one. Okay, so now I've got to start thinking, how can I do this for myself? Well, that was not possible if I was flat on my back and I couldn't get to the kitchen. So I started saying, anyone that asked me, is there anything I can do? I'd say, you know what? I would really love a couple of salads from the salad bar. Do you think you could bring that over? Oh, yes, of course. And I had gotten, with the help of some of my friends, a cooler right by my bed. It had my glucernas in it, and it had ice packs in it, and I would put the salads in there. And then when I got hungry and I was doped up on ibuprofen, I could reach in and then I sort of prop myself up on pillows and I could eat. I got through. I also knew that God had my back in more ways than one, right? And I said, I know I'm taken care of. And out of the blue, my neighbor came over. Forget how, maybe I called her about something. I don't remember. Anyway, she came over. She found out the situation I was in. Every morning after that, for the next 3 weeks, she came over, emptied out my, changed out my cooler bags and put fresh cold packs in there. Went into my fridge for whatever was being refrigerated in there, brought me fresh melon and stuff like that. For 3 weeks, she did that. And at the end of those 3 weeks, I could make it to the kitchen and help myself. God sent me someone I never would have thought of. We have to know that the universe is supporting us. We can never fall into, poor me, why did this happen to me? It's, how did I get so lucky that this happened for me? Michael isn't here today, but you've heard him say over and over again, I've gone through this and this and this and this, any one of which could have broken a normal person. And he said, I just know it's all God deal, and I know I'm being taken care of, and I am, and he is, and he makes it here most Sunday afternoons. He's amazing. But he has the strong faith that everything that happens for his highest good. And he's going to look for the blessing instead of saying, poor me, ain't it awful, and go down that rabbit hole. It takes a village. So the first thing is ask for help. The second thing is if you're afraid of being a burden, spread it around. Ask for different people for little tiny things. They're so happy. Now that's what you can do if you're the one with trouble. We, as a support team, can call. Just call. You know, when I was first widowed, people would tell me at church, oh, I think about you so often. I hope you're doing all right. And the first thing that crossed my mind is, if you think of me so often, why don't you ever call? It would be really nice to know that people were thinking about me right now when I'm feeling so alone in the world. When Leo was sick, his best friend cousin never phoned. He texted me on the email, how's Leo doing? How's Leo doing? I would say, well, he's doing this, but he would love a call from you. When I asked why he didn't, he said, well, I was afraid I was going to interrupt something. I didn't know when to call. That's not the point. If it's not a good time, you would just say, it's not a good time. I'm changing his bag. Would you please call back in 20 minutes or we'll call you. Call. Let people know that you're thinking about them. That's a simple thing to do. And so often people don't. They just don't. Visit. Do you know how many of Leo's relatives did not bother to come and see him while he had cancer, but they showed up at the memorial service? He would have loved a visit from his cousins, his friends, but nobody thought to bother coming. I had to call his friends from work and say, he's really depressed right now. Would you mind coming and visit? Oh, yeah. See, that's call for help, right? Yeah, we'd love to come over. And then I gave him some diabetic apple pie and it was wonderful. And Leo had a great day. I mentioned that to another friend of mine and he decided to go visit his brother in California who had cancer. And he was glad he did because his brother died a few months later. If he hadn't gone to California, he would never have seen his brother alive again. I don't know why we don't think of those things, but we don't. Being a witness to someone else's pain is huge. You know, people who have survived the Holocaust, people who have survived hostage situations, people who have survived all kinds of things like that. They will say, I would never want anybody to go through what I went through, but I am desperate for your recognition that I went through. Witnessing other people's pain is one of the greatest gifts that we can do, that we can give. Witnessing their pain. We don't want to get sick with them. You know, there's a famous motivational speaker that says poor people can't help poor people, so you might as well be wealthy and abundant. Sick people can't help sick people either. You're in bed too. But witnessing the suffering of others helps divide the burden. It lessens. It's a form of support. It lessens the pain. Now, we got to recognize that some of the pain we're in is self-instituted. You know, it's how we're looking at things. If we realize that we could change the way we look at things and save ourselves a lot of grief, we probably would, but it doesn't often occur to us when we're in the middle of it. That's where asking God for another way of looking at it can be extremely helpful. And then being open to an answer. If we go to visit somebody and they're going on and on and on about ain't it awful, ain't it awful, ain't it awful, we can always say, I understand you're in a lot of pain. I understand this is really a difficult time for you. And mean it without buying into what they're talking about, because what they're talking about, you know darn well, is self-induced. But that doesn't mean they're not hurting. It just means they don't know how to fix it. There are so many ways we can help one another. And holding the high road for them, holding for the high road for ourselves, but sometimes it's hard. So if they're in pain, we see them painless. We hold the joy for them. It works. When Leo was towards the end of his disease and he was lying there in pain, I finally, after a whole year, was able to separate my feelings from his pain. And when I could do that, I could go to joy when he went to pain and he was out of his pain within a minute or two. Why? Because he could resonate to me. Instead of me resonating to his pain, which I've been doing all year, he had a chance to resonate to me and the joy that I was choosing to feel in that moment. And the pain would go away. Because joy is the opposite of pain. And then we could just listen to some nice music and be peaceful and calm, and he wasn't, moaning and groaning. We can do that for each other. We can do that for each other. But we cannot buy into their pain. We can witness it, but that's not the same as buying into it. Because the minute we buy into it, we make it real for us too. And that's what people like Walida have been trained to do. The practitioner doesn't buy into your pain. She goes directly to truth and helps you go there too. Healing doesn't happen in isolation, but in community. So the three things I'm saying tonight: when you find yourself in a traumatic situation, call for help. Support the supporters. And recognize that sometimes we're creating our own issues. I have friends who've had operations and they expect to be over it in 4 weeks. How many of you have had an operation that you got over in 4 weeks? You want your life back. You want to be able to walk normally like you did before. But your body has other plans. I thought I was going to be over my back issue. I had a tremendous cramp in my back that wouldn't go away. I thought I was going to get over 3 weeks. Well, guess what? School started without me that year. 5 weeks before I could even get out of bed. People that have concussions, they want to get back to normal in 6 months. It takes a year. People that have divorces expect to be happy and joyful within at least a few weeks or months. Some people, depending on how they're looking at it, can take years. Grief's the same way. Don't set yourself up for failure because you want a timetable that gets you back to the old normal fast. You got a new normal to deal with right now. And then as you heal, as you allow God and Spirit to heal you, it will get better and you will be able to get onto your new normal and you'll be a stronger person for it. Don't set yourself up for failing by saying, I want to be well by now, and then find out you didn't, because you're going to start resisting the pain, resisting the fact that it's not working that fast, and you're adding that to the fact that you're holding it to you because you're resisting it, right? That which you resist persists. So allow it to be, feel the pain, work through it to the other side. Breathe and let God heal you. She'll ask for another way of looking at it. Brings you peace. Then the trauma is much reduced, moves by much faster. And you're whole and free, and you feel in a sense of community that you're not alone in this world. Because you aren't. And this church does that. And I'm very proud of us. Namaste. Questions, comments? I'm sure there's comments. Yeah.